Okay, we are back from lunch. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a great lunch. We're going to dive right into our afternoon session. And let me tell you, from what I've experienced within the last 5 minutes, you guys are in for a treat.
Don't oversell.
Joining us today for a special taping of the podcast, Two Guys on Your Head, is the creator, executive producer, and host, Rebecca McInroy. Rebecca, please introduce the guys.
I will do my best. Thank you so much, Robbie, and thank you for having us today, because this is such an important topic, and we really love coming here. We wish we could be with you all in person, of course, but we're just excited to be here. So to my right, to my left, I don't know how you're experiencing it, is Dr. Art Markman. And Art's been doing quite a few things. He is, of course, one of the Two Guys on Your Head from the podcast Two Guys on Your Head at KUT. He also is the executive director of IC Squared, and he served as the founding director of the program called the Human Dimensions of Organization at UT. And now he's in meetings every single day as the vice provost of the University of Texas at Austin. But Art is also an incredible runner, swimmer, Peloton person, and dog father and husband, and wonderful person all around in general.
Holy smokes!
And a really good driver. Really good driver.
And then there's Bob.
And then there's Bob. And Bob Duke's right below me. So no,
exactly right.
So Bob is interesting. Bob teaches over in the music school. He's the Marlene and Morton Meyerson Centennial Professor in Music and Human Learning. And when I first met Bob, it was because Art thought that Views and Brews had to have a musical component to any show. And he really wanted to do a show on his book, Smart Thinking. And he's like, and Bob plays the saxophone, or I'll play the saxophone. Bob will play something else because he's over in music. So there's a musical component. Yeah. It didn't have to be music. So, but we have Bob from the music school. Absolutely fantastic. And, I don't know exactly what you did over in California, but you were part of a school in California that teaches music savants and incredible musicians how to teach music, right?
Yes, and also that, and also how they learn music. So they would learn music. Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it was fun. It was great fun.
These guys are incredible, and you can ask them anything. So please put some questions in the Q&A. But let's start off with talking about the psychology of distracted driving. What are we talking about when we're talking about the psychology of distracted driving? What is it?
Yeah. Well, I think we should probably talk about, just in a basic way, what it means to become distracted. I think all of us, not just when we're in a car, but all times through the day, we're engaged in some activity that engages our attention and captures our attention, and then something happens that leads us to shift our attention to whatever it is that happened, right? And what's worth thinking about is that Art. Yeah, what's worth thinking about is why is that? Why are we so easily pulled off of what we're doing when we should? And it's sort of something we should consider when we think about ourselves. There are some activities that we engage in, and this includes all the way from older adults all the way down to children, that are so captivating. I mean, a firecracker could go off behind us and we wouldn't stop paying attention to what we're paying attention to. Yeah. And then other things, the slightest distraction will pull us off of what we're doing. So what I think it'd be useful to talk about today is what are the features of those things that actually hold our attention, and what happens when we're pulled off of attending to that thing, whatever it is, and start attending to something else.
Yeah. And so
why is it so easy to be distracted when you're driving? That's another thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Art.
Well, that's a big piece of it. So let's think first about those things that are really hard to get distracted from. And the psychologist Csikszentmihalyi which is, you've gotten your PhD in psychology when you can pronounce that, and even more so if you can spell it, because it involves a lot of C's and S's and Z's. But one of the things that he studied was the concept of flow. And flow is this state that you get into in which you are deeply engrossed in something you're doing, to the point where you don't even notice the passage of time anymore. You're completely absorbed in it. And what we know about the flow state is that you tend to get into it when you are doing something that you are perfectly capable of doing, but really lives right at that limit of what you're capable of performing. So it's when you're completely bodily engaged, because you every resource you need is devoted to doing that. And what's interesting about driving is driving rarely creates that kind of flow state, because we go out of our way not to be driving in conditions that put us at the very outer limit of our abilities. We actually spend a lot of time from the beginning of driver training to create lots of habits in order to make sure that most of the driving we're doing is actually pretty easy. We don't want to be completely tested by it. And in fact, we don't really want to be driving most of the time in everyday circumstances in situations that are a real test for us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you create a situation that is largely pretty routine, your brain starts looking around and going, yeah, I got this. Can't you give me something more interesting to do? After all, as we talk about on lots of our shows, the brain, while being, say, 3 to 4% of our body weight, uses 20 to 25% of our daily energy supply. And so something that's that energy hungry wants to be used. It wants all that capacity engaged, and much of what driving requires from us doesn't really engage it. So our brain is sitting there going, hey, give me something else. Give me some more stimulation. Give me something that's more important to do, because most of your brain is thinking, I got this. This is easy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And what Art is bringing up is the idea of how much of our behavior as we practice becomes automatized in the lingo, meaning that we don't have to devote conscious attention to doing that. And you think a lot of things that we engage in every day are highly automatized aspects of our behavior. We don't have to think about how our feet are moving when we walk. We don't have to think about, if we're typing and we're an experienced typist, we don't have to think about where a particular letter is on the keyboard. All of that, over many practice opportunities, now has sunk below our conscious awareness, and it just runs off by itself. And a lot of aspects of driving can do that. We don't really know how far we have to push the accelerator to get up to a certain speed, but we do know, but we can't articulate that. We don't know if it's 10 centimeters or 3 centimeters or whatever. Likewise, there are all kinds of things about steering. We don't really know how far I actually turn the wheel to go to that turn, whatever that turn happens to be, or how many revolutions of the wheel I have to do to make a left turn. All that's become highly automatized, and we don't think about it. And as Art was saying, one of the things about driving is that most of the time, there are no negative consequences of being momentarily distracted. And that's why this is such a big problem, because it's possible to be momentarily distracted, often while driving, with no negative consequences. But every once in a while, if you're distracted, something catastrophic can happen. And having somebody maintain their attention when, as Art was saying, we have a bored brain who would like to be doing something else, because what we have to be looking out for are things that are unexpected, that are likely to appear in our way or coming up behind us too fast or whatever. And we're just not used to doing things like that.
Yeah. And so it creates a perfect storm, really, right? Where your brain is desperately crying out for more stimulation. And so it encourages you to do things that are potentially distracting. And we have a certain number of distractions that we put on board of most cars anyhow. I mean, the reason that there are radios and connections to your the Bluetooth connection to your phone so that you can listen to the music you brought with you, or a podcast, for example, or an audiobook, is because we do anticipate that we're going to create a certain level of distraction. But unfortunately, because there aren't that many, as Bob was pointing out, that many negative consequences to a lot of those distractions in most normal circumstances, we push ourselves ever further down the ladder of distraction, in which we end up having cell phone conversations, and then maybe even momentarily looking away as we fiddle with the screen of our phone, or worse yet, send a text. And that's where it becomes a problem, because most accidents, most crashes rather, let's call them what they are. It's not an accident if you're doing it because if you get into trouble when you're distracted. Most crashes don't occur because somebody just drives into something else while paying attention and under the normal course of driving. Most crashes happen because something unexpected happened. A change in the road surface, a car where you didn't expect it to be, a pedestrian or a bicycle where you didn't expect it to be. And those unexpected things require vigilance in order to find them. And vigilance, just as is also a technical term in psychology, which is vigilance is this notion of paying attention when there's nothing going on. So, and that turns out to be a very hard thing to do. There are psychology studies going back 75, 80 years in which people would look at a screen or at a wall and wait to identify an event that happened only periodically. And it's hard. It is hard to keep yourself paying attention, waiting for the thing that might or might not happen.
Yeah, and when you think about it, throughout.
Poor Rebecca's never going to get a word in.
I just kind of sit here, hang out with my pen.
Throughout most of our history, see, I'm still going. Throughout most of our history, human beings have not been able to move fast enough to get into as much trouble as we could get into being not vigilant as we do in a car, right? Because I mean, if you're going 60 miles an hour, which by the way, we don't have any experience with that in our evolutionary history until very recently, a moment's lack of attention, like I said earlier, can have a catastrophic effect. That's an entirely new experience for human beings. Because typically, we're moving at speeds that there's plenty of time, to get off task and then pay attention and get out of the way. But not when you're driving, 4,000 pounds of, metal hurtling through space at 60 miles an hour. So it's all this to say that distraction is understandable how it happens with cars. Yeah. But then the question is now, what do we do about it? And I bet that's what Rebecca is trying desperately.
No. I'm not. I'm being very vigilant, but I'm wondering. This is what I'm wondering. I'm actually wondering if all distractions are equal. Because I think, as you mentioned, you can listen to a book on tape, you can listen to a podcast, you can listen to whatever. You can even send a text when you're talking. But I think sometimes those can take you out of the driving experience, sometimes not. But it's really the distractions that are the most kind of catastrophic, can be the most catastrophic, or when you're looking, your vision is taken away from something else. I wonder how this
yes and no. So first of all, just having your eyes on the road doesn't necessarily mean you're really processing the stuff that's in front of you. So there's a lot of work showing that there are times where if you are multitasking, that is doing several things at the same time mentally, even if you are looking at the road, you may still miss key things that are going on. Now, you may feel like you've got it under control. One of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about multitasking is we have to be clear. The human mind doesn't multitask, right? The human mind shifts back and forth between the tasks that it's doing. And so, while you are focused on a conversation you're having or listening to an audiobook, you are not necessarily spending much effort or have much effort to expend on the driving task. And one of the things to bear in mind is that the regions of your brain that you use to shift back and forth between tasks are the same regions of the brain that you use to monitor your performance. And so you're actually your own worst judge of how good a multitasker you are, because you're going to think I'm doing fine when in fact you're going to have missed the fact that you almost clipped a car next to you or that you ran a stop sign or something else. And it's only when somebody shows you your performance that you realize how badly you did. So there is a bit of an illusion that if I'm doing something, as long as I'm looking at the road, everything is fine. Now, certainly not looking at the road is worse than looking at the road. Okay, I
think we can stipulate that. Right. That's the thing. Yeah.
But just because you're looking at the road doesn't mean that what you're doing is fine. You still may not be processing any of the stuff that you see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize something that Art said because it went by really fast. The human brain doesn't multitask. And there is just a pervasive, persistent belief among us human beings that we can do more than one thing at the same time.
Yeah.
But that's an illusion because as Art said, we're just actually switching our attention between or among several things fast enough that it makes it seem like we're paying attention to more than one thing at the same time. But another thing I want to say in response to—
By the way, you can't multitask when you're watching a webinar either. For those of you at home right now, I just want you to be aware of that. So put down the phone.
Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. But what I want to say about what Rebecca was asking before, though, about the kinds of distractors that there are, like listening to the radio or listening to an audiobook or something like that. What is more distracting are things that you have to engage with, meaning you have to generate something on your own, which is why when you're talking on a phone, right, you're having a conversation, you're having to listen to the other person you're having a conversation with, you're having to generate responses, and that monitoring sucks up a lot of your attention in a way that just listening to music does not. I mean, listening to music can still suck up a lot of your attention too, but what exacerbates the inattention is how much you're having to generate on your own in the process.
This actually explains why I don't get distracted while I'm having conversations, because I'm not actually listening to the other person.
He finally admits it. Finally, it comes out.
So here's another question. So what I want to talk about a little bit is also how our society right now, like where we are with technology, blah, 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 how that is 10 times more distracting than, say, the driving experience was 50 years ago, because of the idea that you have like dings and bells and whistles and reminders and things that are going off on your phone. If you don't take your phone and put it in the back seat or give it to your son like I do, so he doesn't, scream and cry, and he can watch a show while I'm driving. And I know it's not very good. But I just think I'm wondering about if you could talk about, dopamine, reward, all of those lovely things that are now part of our driving experience that weren't not that long ago.
Well, I think one thing that Art brought up early on in this is the effects of unexpected events on our experience, because things that are unexpected get our attention, right? If it's unexpected, even in a good way, it gets our attention in a way that predictable events don't. And you can understand why that would be advantageous for any organism, to pay attention to things that are not expected, because they may be valuable, dangerous, edible, whatever. There's all kinds of reasons. Like, what was that? And then to find out what that was. But the problem with that is most of the things that we get from a phone, for example, are unpredictable, which causes us to pay attention to them in a way that it wouldn't if our phone beeped every minute, or every 2 minutes reliably. We would stop paying attention to the ding or the bell or the beep or whatever it is. But what gets our attention to it is that it beeps at unpredictable times. And the reason it's beeping is often unpredictable, right? If I get a ringtone and all my ringtones are the same people, I think, well, who is that? So now I'm prompted to figure out who's calling me, even though why do I need to know?
It's a telemarketer.
but I think what that does is make those things even more compelling. And the thing that I tell my students in class all the time who are on social media is that social media has co-opted and exploited exponentially humans' capacity to be distracted by unexpected events. And what I tell my students is, you think you're a Facebook user. You're not a Facebook user. You're the product. Facebook is selling your attention, is selling your eyeballs to advertisers. And the way they do that is they get you to be compelled to look at your Facebook feed because you're not quite sure what's going to be there or when it's going to show up.
Yeah. Oh, dun, dun, dun. So I do think getting to how do we change this? I mean, one thing that I actually am very curious about is how effective are those campaigns that are on the back of semi-trucks that say, how's my driving? Call this number. You know what I mean? Like, does it, because for me, when I see that, I'm like,
don't call that number while you're driving.
I'm going to give them a call. No, I don't think that. I actually think, though, to myself, when I see that, I think, how's my drive? I think like, oh, I got to watch myself. You know what I mean? Like, it does make me check.
You're remarkably conscientious, though.
Yes. You score high in conscientiousness, my friend. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you do.
It is an interesting process. Well, okay. So if that's not going to work for everyone, what's going to work?
So the thing about trying to change behavior is don't put yourself in temptation's way. The thing about temptations is the human brain is really designed to give in to temptation. That's what we do. Because what a temptation is really something that engages your motivational system in a way. And what your motivational system is designed to do is to get you to act. It gives you energy to do stuff. And so all of this very phylogenetically, evolutionarily, very old set of mechanisms buried deep inside the brain using brain structures that we share with rats and mice and sheep and all kinds of other animals. Those brain structures, that's where our motivational system is seated. It gives us energy to do stuff. And what we use to overcome that motivation to do something when we know we shouldn't do it is some brain material above the eyes in what's called the orbitofrontal cortex. It is evolutionarily much newer. It is way less efficient than that other system. And that's what stops us from doing something that our motivational system is telling us to do, but that we don't want to do. Yeah. And the thing about that setting is that the brakes will fail. At some point, you will give in to the thing that you are trying to stop yourself from doing, because it's just hard to ride the brakes all the time. And so instead of putting your phone in a visible place, having notifications coming at you left and right, but then saying, but I'm not going to look at them. I'm going to ignore the ding. Don't do that, right? You got to put yourself in a situation in which the phone is out of reach, out of sight, preferably in the trunk or in the hands of a 3-year-old, so that you can't interact with it. You want to put yourself in a situation in which the undesirable action is also really hard to do. So a simple behavior change principle is make desirable behaviors easy and undesirable behaviors hard. And that is, absolutely the easiest thing to do to help people to avoid engaging with things like the phone while they're driving.
And one of the things that differentiates us as human beings from other species who, as Art was saying, have the same primitive brain structures that we do about leading us into temptation, but don't often deliver us from evil. That's
catchy. That's catchy.
So is that when we're actually trying to do the right thing, we can just say, I'm just going to make my will do it. But what differentiates us as human beings is we can control our environments in a way that many organisms can't. Mm-hmm. And, when you put something in the trunk, that's one example. The phone in the trunk, that makes an example of arts making it easier not to pay attention to your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the thing is that makes distraction harder and paying attention to the road easier is an important thing to do. But we have to say, it's going to be really hard, even if there were no distractions at all, and you had nothing to look at but the road in front of you and your mirrors. It's still hard to pay attention when nothing's changing. You know,
Yeah.
if you're out on 71 somewhere, just going straight, or worse, you know, on I-10 West, you know, there's nothing to pay attention to. It's just the road looks the same all the time. And so the challenge in this is to find a way of teaching ourselves, right? Or if we're responsible for teaching other people how to drive, how to make sure that we're checking in with certain aspects of our environment that give us a reason to pay attention.
Yeah.
Right? Because even as Art was saying earlier, just because your eyes are pointed towards something doesn't mean you're actually seeing it. You know, I mean, meaning that your brain is actually processing it, even though the light might be hitting your retina. So the thing to think about with all of this is, first of all, getting rid of the notion that we can multitask, because we can, right? And then making it easier by building an environment, whatever that means, to limit the number of opportunities to be distracted, and helps you register and pay attention to things that make your driving safer and more optimal.
And I want to raise one thing here that actually makes all of this even more complicated. Okay, if I could guarantee you a perfect driving environment, meaning a flat road that or you know a road that doesn't twist and turn suddenly, that doesn't have any surprise things that might happen, that is, you know, where the road itself is in perfect condition, you know, so you're driving down the perfect highway without any other cars that you have to worry about. The data suggests that actually in that perfect driving environment, a mild level of distraction actually improves your driving performance. This is the complexity. And the reason for that has to do with a lot of what we've done when we drive. A lot of our practice has what's called automatized driving. It's turned it into this kind of habit where we get a real feedback loop between what we're seeing and what we're doing, the movement of our hands, the movement of our feet. And the thing about automatized actions is that if you think about performing those actions, you get worse at them. It's sort of like if you play golf or tennis and you suddenly start thinking about your golf and tennis swing, you start screwing up your golf and tennis swing because it actually, as Bob was saying earlier, we don't know exactly how far to push the pedal down or exactly how far we're moving the wheel. It's this complex dynamic interaction between the actions we're taking and the feel of the car as we're moving. And we're really, and actually, if, you know, because it's automatized, if you think about it, you actually disrupt the coordination of that activity. And so the data suggests if you stick somebody in a driving simulator so that they are driving through a perfect environment, a moderate degree of distraction actually makes them drive slightly better than not allowing them any opportunities for distraction, because just, you know, thinking about what you're doing will cause you to veer out of your lane and stuff like that in slight ways. The problem is, as soon as you introduce any reality to the driving situation, meaning other cars that do unpredictable things, or stop signs, or pedestrians, or bicyclists, or bad road conditions.
Deer, if you're out for Bob's house.
Right.
Yeah.
As soon as any of that becomes part of the driving environment, you immediately get worse as soon as you've got distraction in the environment, because you start missing things.
Amazing.
But lots of people have an experience of driving on highways and things like that, in which, while it's not the perfect driving condition, there isn't that much unexpected going on. And so that moderate degree of distraction doesn't actually make you a bad driver most of the time. But again, the problem is the costs of an error, of a significant error in driving are too high. And so part of what we need to do is, as Bob was saying, to give people ways of checking in with that environment, of saying, I'm gonna check my mirrors. I'm going to make sure that I scan the environment and actually, remind yourself, check the mirror, check my environment, look to the left, look to the right, in order to make sure that I do stay vigilant, because the costs of an error are so high, and that's the thing we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, and I think what's been very helpful is many more advanced technology that's been installed in automobiles now have sensors that sort of warn you if you're approaching the car in front of you too quickly, and your car computer decides that if you keep going at this speed, you're going to hit the thing that you're heading toward. I mean, those kinds of things are very helpful because they do amplify the sources of information that you have. So it's less dependent on your vigilance alone to try to keep it together. But again, one of the things that I think we want to develop in the minds of all people is how much of a responsibility it is to be driving a car. And I know we try to impart this to young drivers who are just, learning for the first time to drive a car, of really how much power they have at their disposal. I mean, physical force they have at their disposal, and the safety of all the other people around them and themselves and the passengers in their car is their responsibility. And I think, if you've been driving a long time, you think, I'm driving. What? Come get in the car. We're going to go somewhere, But I think it is a pretty awesome responsibility that over time it's become such a common part of everyday life. You forget that you're driving on a road and you could do harm to yourself and other people. And the fact that you don't and that other people don't. I have to tell you just a little anecdote here. I still marvel at four-way stop signs. One of the things I love about this country, people go to four-way stop sign, people wait their turn. I just think that's amazing, because I've been to other countries where you come to a four-way intersection, nobody's waiting their turn. But it's such a lovely thing to see these people thinking about other people. And, well, now you go now, and now it's your turn because you got there first, and that kind of thing. To really, point up the responsibility that's part of driving, and that paying attention is part of that responsibility, I think is a really important thing. It's a very positive, I think, take on what it means to be a driver.
Yeah. One of the things, we have so many questions and comments, and so I think we'll probably get to those in the next 5 to 10 minutes here. But one of the things that we haven't talked about, which I think is interesting right now, is this road rage. I know we've done a show on road rage before, and I know we're not really supposed to be talking about this right now, but I think it's really interesting.
So what?
I was distracted by the idea of it. So here's the thing. I think, when you're in traffic and say you see somebody texting and driving, this wonderful woman right here, Nicole just said she sees people texting and driving all the time, driving past her, and driving with kids in the back, and driving, and like texting and all this stuff. And it's infuriating, because you know how dangerous it is. And when you're not doing it, you feel like, listen, suckers all around me. I don't do this. Neither, of course, that's my own righteous indignation. But I think that road rage is a really interesting thing in driving. And I just wonder if we can spend just a couple minutes talking about road rage, and when we feel ourselves kind of getting hot under the collar, how to step away from that feeling. Because I think it's a big deal.
Well, so I think there's two pieces to actually these examples, right? I mean, there's one kind of road rage that really has to do with boredom and frustration in the driving environment. So one of the things we talk about a lot is that as human beings, we like to have agency. We like to make sure that we're able to control our efforts and our surroundings, and a lot of driving involves situations that are out of your control. You're stuck in traffic, or there's somebody in front of you who's driving too slowly when you need to get somewhere, or you get stuck at the third light in a row, or whatever it is. And because those things are out of your control, you start feeling frustration. You get a buildup of motivational energy that then has to get released in some way, and one way to release that is through yelling and splendid gestures at others. On top of that, though, I want to add one other layer, which is when it comes to things like texting and driving and things like that, where you see other people doing it, is that if you are somebody who who understands how dangerous that is, and understands that people who are texting and driving, or doing their makeup and driving or whatever, are putting other people at risk. You also get a violation of what's called a protected value, where you think, I won't accept people doing this thing. And protected values also violations of protected values also create a certain amount of moral indignation. And so now you've got the perfect storm when you're in a car, which is you have all these things that are out of your control that already get you feeling a little bit angry or frustrated. And then on top of that, somebody does something that's just a moral wrong to as far as you're concerned, and that just creates the perfect set of circumstances to get you to blow your top. But because Bob is so good at calming things down, I'll let him talk a little bit about how to calm that.
Well, one thing that thanks for that handoff. Well, one of the things that I think to think about this is that, we think about how many people we actually interact with in a day in our workplace. I mean, especially if we're not working in a place where we're interacting with the public, like a cashier or a receptionist or something like that. We're used to interacting with a relatively small number of people in a day. But when you get in a car and you get on a road, you're interacting with hundreds, potentially thousands of people, and none of you chose each other, And so some of those people have very different ideas about what's appropriate and what's safe and what's polite and, what's mine and those kinds of things. And suddenly you're thrust into a different kind of environment, And one of the things that to me is important to consider is that you really can't, in the moment, when you get lit up by somebody doing something that is outrageous to you, you can't just tell yourself then, okay, we'll just calm down.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but it's too late. But for most of us, we've experienced enough things in our life experience to be able to anticipate. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm probably going to pass somebody who's texting, maybe somebody texting with a kid in a car who's not even in a seatbelt, or whatever, right? But in a calm moment, to say, okay, so what am I going to do then to channel my thoughts and energies in some way other than just getting irate, And I think again, it's hard to help somebody stop yelling mid-scream. Mm-hmm. But so the time to think about that is, again, in a quiet moment. So what happens when you see things like that? What happens if an inattentive driver cuts you off in traffic? What kind of things should you be doing other than yelling and screaming and racing up behind her or him or whatever? I mean, it's coming up with alternatives that are, first of all, safer and actually more healthy for you as a person, because getting your blood boiling, to use Art's phrase, is not a physically healthy thing to experience. So I think giving yourself the space to think about what are my alternatives for reacting to things that are inevitably going to happen. I mean, if you drive, all that stuff's going to happen to you, right? So now, how am I going to deal with that when it does happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really key too, is that you're doing something. I think we've talked many times in the past about how to change your behavior, and you can't just change your behavior by not doing one thing, but you have to actually engage and do something else. It's important. Yep. So we have one question from Lewis Leff, and this is really interesting because he says, how likely is distracted driving messaging from governmental groups going to change driver behavior in the community? If you think it could, what type of messaging would actually work in a crowded ad marketing space? Theory of planned behavior as a model.
Yeah, that's a great question. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, clearly government messages always work. Right? I mean, one of the things that's really important to do is for people to hear messages from people that they can identify with. For example, if you're trying to reach kids, it's kind of important to get kids involved in the messaging, because it's. I mean, I'm thinking I've been thinking about this very issue quite a bit, not in the realm of distracted driving, but in health behaviors around COVID, because I'm part of the COVID planning team for the University of Texas. And, having peer-to-peer messaging is really valuable. And so I think that's, one big thing. And then another is to get back to what Bob was saying, which is, to give people specific suggestions of behaviors to engage in, and then to get people, and this relates to theory planned behavior, to get people to actually plan for themselves what they're going to do, and create that kind of implementation intention, and then so that they know what to do when the circumstance arrives. And I think that combination is really powerful.
Yeah.
And I think, the thing about messaging, when I was a kid and going to driver ed class, the messaging tactics were watching, Death on the Highway and other, slasher films, and these terrible oh yeah, you're too young to remember that. They would show.
I remember the dummies, the crash test dummies.
No, this one with dummies. These were scenes of car crashes and mangled bodies and everything.
I don't think
those people were dummies in a different way, but yeah,
right. So it was an effort to scare you straight, which those
that always works. Yeah,
it always works, right? But I think the idea of describing things in ways that how your behavior affects not just you, but affects other people. I think even with our polarized political situation right now, there is some idea that I think generally people want to do good by other people, at least in the abstract, and if it doesn't cost them a lot. Mm-hmm. And, you think about the things that are involved in being a safe driver and a courteous driver and those kinds of things. I think pitching all of those things as a social good, that's what we do, using plural pronouns a lot, is a positive way to do all of that. So you're not scolding, you're not cajoling, you're just saying this is what courteous people do, and you want to be. And I think the interesting thing is, to bring it into something immediate and dire is the COVID thing with masks and all that. I mean, I think what's not been portrayed and conveyed effectively is the mask wearing is not for you. The mask wearing is for other people whom you might inadvertently and unknowingly infect, right? And that's why Art always has a mask at the ready, because his virus are so powerful. They come through electronic media, and I think that's a real thing. I think we don't often enough appeal to people's sense of community in thinking about behavior. It's like what you should do. You should do this, rather than this is how you're going to help your family and your neighbors and those kinds of things. Which I think that all the things about driving and safety and those kinds of things are really. Now, again, I'm saying this without any data. This is speculation on my part, but it seems like that is a more effective strategy than threats and punishment.
There's a really good example of that in Minnesota too, where they tried to teach people how to do that, like kind of the zipper, and going onto the freeways. Like people didn't really know how to enter the freeways.
Alternate merge,
yeah. There was a huge campaign that was super successful in Minnesota. But long story long, we got to go.
Yeah,
One thing that we didn't touch on that I'm being reminded to touch on is, does it work to just turn off your notifications on your phone? Turn them off.
It helps.
Helps.
I mean, anything that doesn't call attention to the distractions is a good thing, right? So part of what your phone is doing, as Bob was saying earlier, is you're the product for most of the apps on your phone. And so most of them are calling out for your attention. So all of those notifications are going email, Facebook, Twitter. So to the extent that you can get your phone to stop acting like an attention-starved 9-year-old, that certainly helps, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Having your phone out of your presence altogether is even better. And also, I mean, some of those, some of the devices now that won't, where if they're attached to the car and you're driving, then you have to go through extra steps before it'll let you actually get at your phone. All of that helps because it just makes the undesirable thing harder to do.
Yeah.
And so all of that helps. Will it cure the problem alone? No, but it definitely helps.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
And I just want to respond to just one thing that somebody had put in the chat a while ago about, if the thing is in the trunk, what if I need my phone? What if there's an emergency or I have a wreck and I need to call somebody? Absolutely true. But I think one of the things we always have to think about when we're talking about things are what are the probabilities? And if you think about what are the probabilities of being in a driving situation where there is some unanticipated event that causes you to strike another vehicle or run off the road or hit a pothole or whatever, versus the probability that you're going to need your phone and need to be able to get to it right away. And even it doesn't have to be the trunk, put it in the glove box, just put it somewhere where it's not making noise and you can't look at it.
And just to leave everybody with a good closing thought on this, if you stick your phone in your trunk, then in the event that you get pulled over and somebody steals your car and throws you in the trunk, you'll have your phone there already.
This is a true story. And you'll have your phone will probably be there.
I'm just saying. I mean, if we're thinking probabilities, I'm just trying to give a.
Just say it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, we have come to the end of our thing, and we so appreciate you having us. Thank you so much. Thank you for your wonderful comments in the chat and the great questions. Robbie, I will turn it over to you for the close.
This has been a great conversation. I just want to say thank you, Rebecca, Art, and Bob. As you saw there, the chat was lighting up with comments and questions. And I will say, I do have some takeaways, limit the opportunities of being distracted while you're in your car. And also, excuse me, being vigilant, paying attention when nothing else is going on. So thank you for this time. We so appreciate you guys taking the time out to be here with us today. And at this time, we actually have what time is it? We have a break till 2:15. But I just wanted to let you know, please remember to go to the attendee lounge and that summit evaluation is there. So please remember to fill it out. All right. I will see everybody back at 2:15. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.